Did you know that if you cast Bounce the moment hero gets grabbed by the Beetle, this'll happen? If you really want your neighbors to hate you, you can make it last even longer with the Metal Box, which is insanely obnoxious. Here, let me turn up its volume, even if that means you won't be able to hear my commentary anymore. I couldn't get anything like it to happen for some other Reflex I tested, or even more unique moves, which is a bummer, though it actually can happen if you pick up a Franklin badge the moment you get grabbed, which is less visually chaotic but still really loud. And I don't think it's frame perfect, at least I got it way too consistently for that to feel like the case, but maybe I'm just really cool and good at everything. By the way, this came from a prompt by T.O. on my Discord. And sticking with Hero, Zach Sparkle had a really funny tweet talking about one of Hero's victory animations. For this animation in specific, Hero uses Kazat before striking a pose. But as for a lot of other visual effects, the way they appear in the animation isn't actually static. Well, it is in the sense that it's electricity. No, actually cut that out of the script, that sucked. So like the exact placement of the lightning effects will differ slightly between each and every time you see it. And if you didn't know, you can guarantee which animation you want to see by holding either left, up, or right on the D-pad during the transition phase. In this case for Hero, it's by holding up. Though if you lost the round, your D-pad inputs don't mean anything because losers don't deserve choices. This is Kirby's right input animation, by the way. Also, it seems the option to choose is taken out entirely in team battles, even if both winners hold the same direction. Here I had both holding up on the D-pad, but Kirby's animation was his right side one and Hero's was his left side one. If you ever wanted to figure out which directions to hold for your character's animations, just check their wiki. But anyhow, I tried it a couple dozen times and never really got anything too crazy to appear. However, looking at Zach's tweets, we can see some extreme examples of how these effects end up appearing, like this one. It's actually hysterical seeing the spark just take up the whole screen like this. But even better is this follow-up they posted where they get straight up flashbanged from the effect. I have no clue what the odds are for any of these things to happen, as the ones I got were all relatively normal, but the fact that it can happen at all is genuinely amazing and means I'll probably be choosing this animation exclusively going forward. Also, unrelated, but like, in the past I thought that the specific transition animation was tied to the victory animation that follows, but apparently that's not the case. You can see that it either slashes in the Smash logo, or just a plain old vertical slice down the middle, some kind of waterfall swoosh effect, or a blotchy horizontal one. Then there's a hexagon pattern thing, and there's this one that does things and stuff. Man, I'm good at my job. Anyways, I'm sure you're frothing at the mouth for me to actually talk about this guy, so let's do that. I recently talked about every item in the game, but a lot of what I said was fairly generalistic, so here's some Steve-specific tech, because, well, frankly, it's just because Titanium joined my Discord and shared a bunch with me, so credit goes to them for a lot of this stuff. That way I don't have to break the flow of the video to cite them each time. Starting off is the Hothead. Steve already has obviously high synergy with this item given that he can place blocks on the stage that affect its travel path, but the interesting thing is that the Hothead also interacts with things like TNT. And given that these aren't really a perfect block size or placement, it can make the Hothead act a bit weird. In particular, if it's say on a platform and there's TNT under it, the Hothead will latch on in a way that forces it inside of the stage, where it'll keep doing its rotations from inside the collision. At first it might seem stuck in there, but for some reason if you place more blocks down, it'll reattach to those and get brought back on stage, essentially letting you store the Hothead. I admit that the idea of storing it isn't particularly useful, though if you're facing someone who's got a reflector, it can be nice to deny them any opportunity. Now, it can work on other stages with a similar setup, though for some others it didn't quite work out. And I tried doing this with my own block to see if I could be a strong independent Steve, but unfortunately that didn't work. But this is actually pretty cool too. Being able to keep the Hothead hovering in one single spot could possibly come in handy. Also, it seems like this all works with the anvil as well, not just the TNT. So that's pretty cool. Anyways, the next tech involves the Unira. When I brought this item up in the past, I mentioned how once it's stuck, it'll tank any damage that goes its way without having its placement changed, but what I didn't mention was that if it becomes airborne in any context, that property of it changes and now it can be knocked around. So there's obvious potential here with Steve's blocks, letting you juggle the thing around like a basketball. Now here's the thing, when you initially throw the Unira, before it's been stuck in place, technically anyone can do this juggling or launching maneuver. So it doesn't exactly make it a Steve-specific tech in that case. However, it's still worth noting, especially with TNT, how you can have it sit around acting as it normally does, and then change its positioning after the fact, which is kinda unique. Also, in terms of its hitbox when being launched, it's kinda weird. Sometimes it doesn't have one, whereas other times it does. I found that using the magma block was the most consistent in getting a hitbox, but otherwise you can just consider this to be more of a fun repositioning tech. Now, okay, all of that is fine and dandy, but I really like the screw attack tech. Normally the effect comes out in time with your jump, everything lined up all nicely. You can use attacks during it, but these will interrupt that screw attack. But for whatever reason, for Steve using his up tilt or jab, or forward tilt, basically any move that's the same grounded as it is in the air, if you hold down the attack button when you jump, the screw attack won't activate at all. And if you let go while still in the air, it'll activate late. Now this looks like a double jump, so you might think that that's just burning that, but no, you can still double jump after this. And you can set up the same thing again, letting you get another delayed screw attack. Given the delay, in practice it's basically a quadruple jump. And while this extra height isn't huge, because it's with Steve's dog water jump ability, it does let you get higher than if you just double jumped normally. And the way it works with your up air really lets you get some solid combos going, as if Steve needed any more of those. And his bonus feature is how, by using the anvil in the air, you're technically grounded again. And because of this, that resets the state of the screw attack, letting it activate again. So not only do you essentially get 4 jumps, but you also get a 5th jump with a 3rd screw attack. Or, you know, obviously you could just place a block down and start the whole process again in the air, that works too. That's just DLC for you, I guess. There's other characters with similar kinds of moves, but in trying both Mega Man and Min Min, neither of them seem to be able to trigger a delayed screw attack response like Steve was, despite my best efforts. Also, a quick break from item tech. Alex showed me something on my Discord that's a bit cursed. Normally, Steve's crouch animation is just a single frame. It's jarring, but in a stylistic way to match Minecraft. So all is well and good, but if you crouch shortly after landing, you notice that the animation is smoother and longer than it should be. Once you've recognized how it's supposed to look, seeing this version is just even slower and ironically even more awkward. Like, you're not supposed to do that, dude, stop! Another weird Steve thing is how, while normally he can angle his shield like any other character can, if his shield is hit at all, then in this time you'll stop being able to move it. And if it was angled before getting hit, then afterwards it'll be centered. I somehow didn't know about this beforehand and only learned it while watching Mockrock's video on me Sword Fighter of all things, in the context of how this quirk of Steve means he has a harder time countering shield pokes and is susceptible to certain combos. Amazing video, by the way, highly recommend watching this one. I'll have a link in the description. Also, this has nothing to do with Steve, but it does have to do with blocks. So I'll mention how on Omega Mushroomy Kingdom, the blocks that line the stage don't actually match up properly to the whole size, meaning the rightmost one actually gets cut off, being shorter than the rest rather than having them all be a perfect match. It was already unfortunate enough that they didn't match up with Steve's blocks in general, but now I'm just kind of mad at everything. I think the left side block might not be the exact same size, it's kind of hard to tell, but at the very least it's a lot more fitting than the right. Now, I was going to compare this to the line on Mushroom Kingdom 2, but it seems that's actually been patched. I covered it in a video a very long time ago. There used to be a line in the center of the stage where one side was a very slightly different hue than the other, but looking at it now using the same methods, that appears to be gone, unless I'm somehow messing something up. So I guess they fixed whatever was wrong and made the stage all one color again, so that's nice. Okay, back to Steve. If you didn't know, his down throw uses his anvil, which is considered a projectile as usual, thus meaning if the opponent can reflect it, it'll make the throw a lot weaker. So, if you use the throw while in Gardevoir's reflection field, it'll instantly get launched into the air with way more momentum than you might think it'd have. In a free-for-all setting, this could even be a really cheeky way to shoot out the anvil and attack someone else, if that's your thing for whatever reason. Also, when Chef Kawasaki starts cooking, if Steve places a TNT and starts knocking it into him, he'll actually get shoved into the Z-axis, pot and everything. This is strange because many other things, like his blocks, anvil, or crafting table, did not do this, just the TNT. So I guess you can just kinda shove where he's located by doing this. This actually works on 2D stages as well, even though they technically shouldn't have a Z-axis. And when doing this, he'll clip into his pot for a bit, getting a taste of his own heat, I guess. By the way, if you move him off stage, he'll remain floating for the duration of his cooking sesh, but once he's done, he'll finally start to fall. Speaking of 2D stages, the bomb gave me a quick submission on my Discord regarding Peach and Daisy. Well, okay, the prompt specified 2D stages and I use that for a smooth transition, but this actually happens anywhere. If you look at Peach and Daisy when they charge their forward smashes, like any other character, they do some shaking before they've reached their peak. And the amount of shaking they do gets super aggressive towards the end. Well, I guess their weapons aren't actually able to handle this type of movement, as there's several frames where they're totally out of position with the princess's hand. This works for any of the angled weapons you can deploy. My first thought in seeing this was whether or not this was just normal, but after looking at quite a few different characters who wield a weapon when charging their smash attacks, all of them seem to have said weapon stay well within the bounds of their hands or wherever they should be. I even tried some unique weapons like Robin's bronze and Levin swords, and it didn't quite clip like Peach or Daisy, so unless there's some other obvious examples I didn't find, my only guess is that this is in part due to how they can change the model of which weapon they're holding while charging, so maybe it's not quite attached to their hand properly, but I could be totally off the mark with that. Next, Yosefu on Twitter had talked about a certain obscure tech, which I really like. So to give an example, if you use Captain Falcon's aerial raptor boost, you'll get a little bounce when you land it. It's not big, but it can be enough to sort of ruin a lot of combo potential. However, if you're using your rapid jab and the attack gets traded with something else, then the next time you use raptor boost, you won't get any bounce, instead just falling straight to the ground. Not only is this really good for shield pressure, letting you act instantly out of it, but it's also just great for combos in and of itself. However, once you've used it, it'll go away for future raptor boosts, and it goes away when you lose a stock. Though if you whiff the move, it'll still be stored, so that's nice at least. And on top of those limitations, this isn't just for interrupting your rapid jab, as simply attacking Falcon during it doesn't do anything. Instead, it seemed to specifically be when the attack is interrupted while also hitting the character at the same time, which is fairly precise in both timing and positioning. I mean, this interaction absolutely happens from time to time, but it's unlikely you'd be able to set it up on your own. And if you're wondering what the tech is called, it was deemed the Bounce Deletion Storage Mechanic, or BDSM. All naming rights go to those who found the tech, so I can't say anything more. If you're curious, this happens with quite a few other characters, like Simon or Richter's down airs, Pit or Dark Pit side specials, which are actually pretty good, and Youngling's down air, which is almost a downgrade since the bounce is actually pretty strong. And credit to Rebecca for showing this one too, but it even works for King DDD's up special somehow, where normally your momentum is halted when you cancel it, but with the bug active, you just get sent plummeting. Like, it looks like I didn't end up canceling the move, but I did, as you can tell from the animation, so that's pretty funny. Though it also doesn't work for a few things you might think it would, like Sheik's bouncing fish, or Greninja's down air, so feel free to test out the whole entire roster if you want. And if you were looking for an explanation on why this weird thing happens, your mom, I don't know. Anyways, to end off this video, I figure I might as well go over how the Switch 2 affects the game. I made a short about it soon after the console launched, but to reiterate, you can obviously expect faster loading times on this console all across the board, meaning alternate costumes are always instantly available to see, but a funny side effect of the fast loading is that it's actually too fast. For instance, the applause that usually carries over into the load screen gets abruptly cut off. Also, when starting a classic mode round, the splash screen is basically impossible to view because of how quick it is, which is actually so insanely funny in practice. Like, yeah, I totally got all that information, dude, thanks, love you. But otherwise, I wanted to see if certain things were still present in the game. As expected, the item limit glitch is still a thing, being capped out at 64, which prevents you from spawning more in, and still crashes for things like Wario's bike. So that's fun. And this is what the Switch 2's crash screen looks like if you haven't seen it yet. And the weird Yoshi glitch on Halberd that totally breaks the game is still fine and dandy, if you call any of this fine. If you want to learn more about how either of those glitches work, I'll link to each video down below, as I have covered them extensively. Though the biggest ones I was curious about were the Kirby copy ability glitch, and I guess the Mii headgear crash. The Kirby one is another that I made a whole video about, but the gist is that you get a copy ability of a character with stance changing, then change to a different character, all while in Squad Strike, get that character KO'd, then start using the copy ability. When it gets unloaded, there's a chance a variety of weird things can happen to Kirby. The thing about this glitch was that it was incredibly inconsistent to pull off, seemingly dependent on hardware, but otherwise just super random. I tested it out on the Switch 2 a bit, and early on I actually did get it to happen. Specifically the variant that makes it to where I can't move Kirby at all, and when he gets KO'd eventually, he'll just stay in the blast zone forever. I tried even more to see if I can get some other variants, but it didn't happen again. So at the very least, we can confirm that the glitch still works, though the jury is out whether or not it's more or less frequent. And with the Mii headgear, this was another inconsistent and weird one, but the idea was that by scrolling around rapidly on the Mii headgear option while having a lot of them available, the game would occasionally just crash. I tried it several times here on the Switch too and couldn't get it to happen. I'd probably request more feedback and attempts from other people, but it's possible that the faster loading times in general just ruined this one somehow. I'm still not entirely sure, I admit. I'm just kind of throwing this section in here anyways, just because I might as well. But with all that, I think we're done with today's video. Just to give you an open look on my current schedule, I've got a big move to plan and do soon. So my next upload is just going to be my item trivia supercut. What happens after that will depend on how smoothly everything goes, but it's possible August will be a generally slow month for me. However, after that, I plan to really hit things hard as I've got a ton of ideas to finally start working on once all is said and done. So with all that, I'd like to thank my patrons Burbo, Raighne, Soul700, and everyone else for their incredible support. Stay casual, and I'll see y'all later.